Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Geezerology. Today, we're going to start a new series that we got an idea for. The title of the series is It's New to Me. And essentially what this is going to be is one of us has discovered an album that's been around for decades, several years or whatever, but for some reason, we didn't catch it the first time around. And for whatever reason, we discovered this album when we heard it, and we listened to it with fresh ears, even though it's an old album. We listened to it with fresh ears, and we're going to tell you what our impressions are of it. Today, Bob is going to talk about the 1987 oil from Midnight Oil called Diesel and Dust. And Bob will tell you how he discovered this thing and why it is that he likes it or dislikes it his first time around. He's going to act like it's a brand new album because it's new to him. Take it away, Bob.
All right. Thank you, Scotty. So I need to do a little historical background before I actually get into this album. And like Scott said, this came out in the 1980s. And I dismissed a lot of the stuff that was in the 80s because I considered it MTV music. So I knew that there was a band called Midnight Oil, and I knew they were from Australia, but that's where my knowledge started and stopped. And for some reason, I just kind of dismissed them as an MTV band. And I don't know why, but that's where I just kind of wrote them off, even though I don't think I ever really even heard any of their music. I just lumped them into that category. And, you know, in the 1980s, I was living in outstate Missouri in the Ozarks, working full time. So my exposure to culture was kind of limited. Plus, musically, I've always been a little bit more straightforward. I like guitar driven, straight ahead rock. I like country, folk, things like that. So when we got into the punk, new wave, new rock stuff of the 80s, it just wasn't something that really appealed to me. So anyway, fast forward, my esteemed colleague Scott here, decided to review Midnight Oil's newest album. So I actually got exposed to it because of what Scott did, and I really liked it. And then he encouraged me that I might want to take a closer look at, their discography. And he recommended Diesel and Dust. And from what I understand, this album is considered by many people to be Midnight Oil's best thing they've ever done. So I listened to it. And I will tell you right now, I was blown away. And normally this is not my kind of music, but I want to think maybe now that I'm older, I'm a little bit maybe more open to things, but I love this album after I've had a chance to listen to it. And it hits me on a lot of different levels. One of them is this is some serious music, people. This band is socially conscious. They deal with environmental issues. They deal with a lot of issues about indigenous rights on this album. And, like I said, they are an Australian band. So, they're singing about issues involving the Aborigines of Australia. And much like our Native Americans, the Aborigines in Australia fell victim to colonial powers, and whites taking over Australia and such. So the album deals with a lot of serious issues, but it lays those issues atop a driving beat. So this is a multi-layered thing. You can listen to intelligent, socially conscious lyrics at the same time that you're tapping your foot and just having a good time. And probably, as I said earlier, it's not something that normally musically I might listen to, but I went into it with an open mind, and it's not traditional guitar-driven rock music. They rely a whole lot more on their rhythm section to drive this music, and it really, really works. Very powerful rhythm section to this band. Dynamite vocalist, and so there's a lot going to this. And I want to start out by talking about a few of the songs on here. This album opens with a song called Beds Are Burning, and this song has got a driving beat. And this is something that I could just put on repeat and listen to over and over and over. It's just a great, great, great opener to this album. and their music fits the part of me that wants to sit there and tap my foot and, and beat out a rhythm and stuff and just listen and get swept away. But then they also engage all of the lobes of my mind because of the seriousness of their lyrics. And those of you who might have followed us around for a while know that I'm a lyrics guy. I always want to know, what's a song about? What is the author of this song trying to say, and what's the meaning? So oftentimes the lyrics are as important to me, as the music itself, and you could go back and listen to the Archie's, Sugar, Sugar, and it's a stupid song, but you get carried away by the beat. Okay. But here you can get carried away by the beat, but also think and think about what they're saying and be lifted up by these lyrics. The Dead Heart is another great tune on this album. Again, it's got a catchy sing-along type style, but it explores indigenous rights. The song called Woe, sonically beautiful, and it kicks in with, and this song kicks off with a powerful statement about spirituality. The lyrics are, "The Lord is my temple, God is by my side. You pay rates on that temple, build materials at the side." Bull Roar is a driving song on this album. And I was kind of wondering, like, what is a bull roar? So I looked it up, and a bull roar is an ancient ritual musical instrument that was also used for communicating across long distances. So this is something that Aborigines would have used out in the desert if they wanted, to talk to each other. And so once I looked up what bull roar meant, that just opened up the meaning of that song tremendously. And so you get lyrics like, "I've heard the bull roars in the desert in the dry rather, sorry." And there are references in a lot of their songs that, are Australian. So there are sometimes you may not get some of their references, like I had to look up what a bull roar was, but these are universal themes. Indigenous people around the globe, have been mistreated by colonial powers. Midnight Oil is very concerned about environmental issues, and we all live in the environment. So these are universal themes that can provide meaning to you whether you're Australian or not. Sometimes is another song that really captivated me. And if you listen to the song, you need to stick with it until the first chorus kicks in. And then the song is just going to blow you away. And in that chorus, as the line, "Sometimes you're taken to the wall, but you don't give in." And then it segues into some more other powerful lyrics. "I know that the cannibals will wear smart suits and ties, and I know that they arm wrestle at the altar." Again, powerful, powerful lyrics. On the Apple streaming version of this album is a song that ends the album called "Gun Barrel Highway." Really, really powerful song. Great way to end this album. And based on my research, I understand that when the album was released in the United States initially, this song was not on the album. And apparently it was considered too powerful for the delicate sensibilities here in the US. But thankfully it is on the streaming music. And if I've encouraged you to listen to this and you decide you want to buy a physical copy of the album, make sure that that song is on the album. And I'll give you a taste of what this song is about with one line from it. So be prepared, there's profanity coming. "Shit falls like rain on a world that is brown." And considering where the United States is right now, I can understand why that might be sensitive to a lot of people, but that says a whole lot about what it means to be a minority, in a lot of the countries in this world. So I cannot emphasize how much I really appreciate this band now and their music. Midnight Oil blends their punk roots with what I think we were calling maybe new rock of the 80s. And they blend it really beautifully. And it's not pure punk music, and it's not traditional rock and roll, but it really, really works. And like I said earlier, they drive their music with a pounding beat and very socially conscious lyrics. But don't take it that, it's not a downer, because they manage to blend that driving music with the seriousness of the lyrics and just come out with I think, a winning formula. So anyway, that's my reaction to Diesel and Dust.
Yeah, it's definitely not a downer. I mean, this is an album. There's a lot of joy in the music in this album. I mean, it just it it gets you up moving and puts just a big smile on your face. Just the music of itself. It's like then and then later. I'm the opposite of you. I'm listening to I'm learning an album by what it sounds like and how it sounds. And once I get in tune with the sound and the emotion that's coming through on this album, then I start paying attention to what the lyrics are all about. And by the time I got to that point where I really started diving in and trying to understand these themes, this album was already, just every time I put it on, it got my butt moving and it put a smile on my face. It's just really, really happy sounding music. And now in retrospect, and this album was my introduction to Midnight Oil. I picked up on it probably about, I think I see that it was the August of 1987 release date was the original release in Australia, but it landed in the United States sometime in 1988. I can't figure out exactly when in 1988 it got a release in the U.S. But it was sometime later in 1988 when I got onto this album, and I just fell in love with it for about 5 or 6 years. I mean, this was one of my 2 or 3 favorite albums ever. Also, one of my 2 or 3 favorite albums ever for the next 5 years was the follow-up called Blue Sky Mining from Midnight Oil. These 2 albums together are just fantastic. They're freaking fantastic. And I can't sit here and tell you which one I like better, because it just depends on which one I'm listening to when you ask me the question, right? Gun Barrel Highway, I did just learn, because just a couple of 3 weeks ago was the first time I heard this song, because I'd had the CD of this album and listened to all these years, and then Gun Barrel Highway's on the back of it. So I thought, oh, okay, just another outtake bonus track that they put onto it. But then it started going, well, that's pretty good outtake bonus track. And then I kind of find out that this was on the original album and on the original Australian release. But like you said, Bob, for the US release, they just thought that that especially that one line in the song would be too off-putting to American audiences, and they didn't want to overplay their hand trying to break through to the American audiences, right? This was Midnight Oil's 6th album, and retroactively, after I got onto this and Blue Sky Mining, I went back and listened to all Midnight Oil from the beginning and stuck with them through their current one released last month called Resist. And just to give you a quick overview, they started out, their debut album was just strictly basically their version of a punk record. It wasn't quite the Sex Pistols or anything like that, but they were definitely rooted in the punk of the late 70s, which is when their career started. And it took over the course of these 5 albums, there were 5 albums and also 2 EPs by Midnight Oil before Diesel and Dust, and they were just slowly evolving their sound. Each album from the beginning until here, each one gets better. And I think on Diesel and Dust, they made a conscious effort to soften up the hard punk edges, because I think at this point they thought that they needed to go ahead and expand their audience beyond just their hardcore audience in Australia. They'd made a few attempts before, but it never took. But I think that Diesel and Dust and also the single Beds Are Burning, which is the opening track of this album, and this was that was the biggest selling single of their career, as it turned out. Beds Are Burning, and now people who know of Midnight Oil pretty much associate them with the song Beds Are Burning. But anyway, with the release of Diesel and Dust and Beds Are Burning, I think they made a conscious effort here to kind of rein their harder edges in and make it a little more palatable to a little more of a mainstream audience, to try to expand their audience, because also by this time they were going all in on, I don't know, you call it protest songs, socially conscious songs, whatever you call them. They were all in by this point. A couple albums previous to this, they were pretty much going all in on this particular mission. This is the first album by Midnight Oil that was produced by a fellow named Warren Livesey, who went on to he produced Resist, the new one, and I think one, two, three, four, five. I think there are 5 Midnight Oil albums that Warren Livesey has now produced since this, and I will tell you that. Those 5 albums that Warren Livesey produces are the 5 best Midnight Oil albums. This is quite a symbiotic relationship between the band and Livesey. They went with somebody else for a couple of albums after this, and those albums weren't as good as this. When Warren Livesey produces a Midnight Oil album, it's an excellent album. Just off the top of my head, Diesel and Dust, Blue Sky Mining were Warren Livesey albums. They took a couple off, and then it came back with in 2002 with an album called Capricornica, which was a good comeback album after a couple that weren't so good. And then that's when Midnight Oil went on hiatus, and then they came back and recorded a couple of albums a couple of years ago, Macarata Project and Resist, which were both produced by Warren Livesey. And yeah, so if you're looking for a Midnight Oil album, look at the credits, find producer Warren Livesey, and that's the Midnight Oil album you need to listen to. Okay. I love this band. I've loved this band for more than 30 years. I put them aside, didn't listen to them for a long time, and then got back into them when Resist. I missed the Macarata Project a couple years ago, but then when Resist came out last month, I jumped on that and started going back and listening to this stuff again. And man, this stuff is just as good now as it was back then. It's just fantastic music. Okay, I talked a lot longer than I intended to here. This is supposed to be a Bob review, but I just wanted to tell you about my long time relationship with Midnight Oil. Great stuff. I love it. Highly recommend going it. And Diesel and Dust is probably the good place to start. If you want to start somewhere, Diesel and Dust is a good place to start. And hit Diesel and Dust and then go forward. Because that's where all the good stuff is. The stuff before Diesel and Dust is there are some good moments in those albums, but none of them are great full albums like what these are going forward, with a couple of exceptions. Their peak was the album before this was called Red Sails on the Sunset. And then Diesel and Dust was their big international breakthrough. And then Blue Sky Mining, they still rode that international breakthrough, and they were touring heavily at the time. And yeah, so that's the peak of them. Go for it. Highly recommend to listen to this stuff. I think your mind will be expanded, and both your musical horizons and your your songwriting horizon. You really learn what good songs are all about, what good songwriting is all about, what good socially conscious songwriting is all about. Fantastic stuff. I don't know if there's ever been any better, even back these people in the 60s and doing all that. I don't think there's ever been any better socially conscious songwriting than what Midnight Oil does. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. Any final thoughts, Bob?
Yeah, just a couple real quick. The first time that I listened to Diesel and Dust, I'm driving in my car. I plug my iPhone into the stereo and go to Apple Music, and I start playing the album, and I hear Beds Are Burning. And I think I hit repeat 3 or 4 times in a row because I just loved that song so much. And then I've also listened to Blue Sky Mining, and that song really resonates with me because my grandfather was a coal miner, he contracted black lung and everything. So it really, it hits me personally because of, my grandfather being a miner. Very socially conscious band, but I don't feel like they're beating me over the head with it because they managed to merge those serious messages with just such delightful driving music. So it's a great combination. And I want to thank you, Scott, for turning me on to this.
Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome.
Okay, gang. Yep. So that's Midnight Oil, Diesel and Dust. Check it out on all your favorite streaming services. It's available everywhere. Thanks for listening, everybody. Join us again next week for another review. We'll be back with Dee on Tuesday for a roundtable discussion. And we sure enjoy you coming around and listening to what we have to say. We'll talk to you soon, everybody. So long.